What's up, y'all, and welcome back to Found Bytes, a game review series. My name is Brian, and I'll be your host. If you don't know about us, we're all about finding and testing out small, high-quality video games. This is a podcast that aims to respect your time and money as a gamer and a consumer by sifting through storefronts and sales to find those gems that may be worth your precious resources. But enough about the show. Let's get into our next game. Haiku the Robot is the game for this week's episode. Haiku the Robot is a 2D action platform Metroidvania developed by Mr. Morris Games and released in 2022. The game is available on PC, Mac, and Switch. So interesting here, it's pretty limited. It's not on PlayStation, it's not on Xbox. And some games I would compare it to, a lot of Metroidvanias that are really high quality we've talked about before. Recently, Nine Souls, but games like Blasphemous, Time Spinner, Animal Well, even like Infernax, lines up pretty well with a lot of them. So it has some aspects of it that are pretty standard, but it's pretty unique in a lot of ways. And it has some fun stuff, you know, it being about robots, the healing mechanic, very unique. Visually, love the colors in this game, but it's interesting because it's very laissez-faire in terms of the direction or telling you where to go. It's unique in the aspect of it being Metroidvania, but kind of open exploration, and I've never seen something that's a Metroidvania be this open. The game was released with an MSRP of $19.99, and runtime, it should get you from start to finish if you're just going straight through. Probably about 10 hours you can be done, but there are a lot of collectibles and other things to accrue in this game. Could put you over 15 hours. Me, I'm playing it on Switch, and I actually just recently beat it, but I got it on sale for $3.99. I think it actually still might be on sale on Switch as of publishing this episode, I'm not sure, but $3.99 on Switch. And I just looked at the time clock. I put in a little more than 12 hours. I didn't 100% the game, but I did do a lot of the extra things. The game did have a physical release through Super Rare Games. I think they're outside of the US, maybe in EU, but they primarily do Switch versions. So the Switch version of this got a Super Rare Games standard edition. It was just the box, but inside had an instruction booklet, some cards. I've gotten a couple things from Super Rare before, like Dandara, but that was a collector's edition. But they do include their cards in this. Seems pretty cool. It was sold out on the website. Maybe check out eBay. I think it was for around like $47 US. And the game was developed by Mr. Morris Games, like we talked about. This is a small team. I think it's just one person. I think Morris is the guy's last name, but he apparently is out of Estonia. So small team out of Estonia. And I think he's working on another game. I'm not sure if it's out yet, but it looks a little different. I think it still has the robot aesthetic, but it's almost like a robot Stardew Valley type thing. So that seems pretty cool. I had not heard of this game, but actually shout out to my friend Paul. So he told me about this. I don't know where he heard about it, but he recently got a Switch, so he's been scouring the store there for sales, and he told me it was on sale. I think that he bought it too, but I bought it, and I just dove right in because I was really jazzed just about the whole presentation. Alright, let's talk gameplay for Haiku the Robot. And of course, like we talked about, it's a 2D Metroidvania, so a lot of standard things are going to apply. You're going to have platforming, a little backtracking, some fast travel, interesting traversal mechanics, which we'll get to. But let's start with the basics. So it's 2D, you're moving left to right. You move at one speed. It's pretty fast, I would say, especially because most of the rooms are not that big. You have a jump mechanic, so you can jump. You can hold it. There is a hold sensitivity, and I really feel like this has a high degree of accuracy. Like the longer you hold it, the guy can jump pretty high, and then you can just tap it and it'll do a little jump. Really love the accuracy and the feel of this. And of course, some more advanced things later on, even doing jumps in quick succession. The cooldown for it is actually pretty low, so you can do like some quick back and forth jumping. You do have a dodge roll, and this can go through enemies. It can also help you kind of move faster, traverse through different rooms pretty quickly. But this will incur on your stamina meter. And your stamina meter is interesting. It's in the top left. It's kind of like the temperature reading on a boiler or something like that. There's different colored zones. So if everything's fine and you have a full stamina, it's at the blue, and then the bar goes until it hits the yellow part, which is kind of in the middle, and then the red, and then if you hit it all the way, so if you keep dodge rolling and run your stamina meter up all the way to the red at the end, the boiler's on overload, and you can't do anything with the dodge roll until it kind of comes out of the red. So it's an interesting mechanic. Again, it's pretty similar to a lot of Metroidvanias or just games in general with the stamina meter, but I do like this, especially because it actually carries over to some other mechanics. You will have a weapon, and so you can swing the weapon. It kind of swings in like a 180-degree arc from the top to the bottom, so that's interesting. It reminds me a lot of Bat Boy, like when you jump and swing the bat in Bat Boy, like it kind of loops around in like a half circle. Not so responsive in succession. It's kind of slow, so you're not going to be able to do too many swipes very quickly. But it's interesting because the pace of you swinging actually works with enemies and platforming pretty well, and the pace that they give out. So it's not something that I noticed in particular. And then, of course, you're going to have an interact button, and the prompt will pop up. Most of the time, it's just to press down. Sometimes it might be to enter in a doorway or talk to an NPC or interact with something. So let's talk traversal in the game. So when you're considering a Metroidvania, thinking about the room layouts and the maps, it's very typical in that respect. A lot of your rooms are going to have different shape. I feel that the map is very accurate in showing it. It's not like Blasphemous where it's just like blocks or stuff like that. It's very much shaped like the room. And also the map will actually give some visual detail, like if there's some, massive background with something visually in the room, it'll actually show up on the map, which I think is pretty helpful to help you remember what room you're talking about. But you're going to be using doors, and it's interesting the way the color looks on the doors or the shape of it. It looks like it's a circle, almost like you would walk through a door in Metroid Prime, kind of like these little tunnel circles. And when you go up to them and actually walk through them, I think they're normally like a dark purple, like they highlight in yellow kind of faintly. Little touches like that to help you kind of understand the environment, even though you're seeing it from a 2D kind of cross section. But of course, you're going to be going through these doors to go screen to screen. And again, like I said, the rooms are varied in size. Sometimes the camera will move with the room if it's really big. Other times it might just be like a one-screen room, but they are shaped pretty uniquely. Now let's get into the platforming. A lot of tropes, things you might be used to, crumbling platforms, moving platforms, hazards that you have to deal with. Some might just do damage, some might actually be like at the bottom of a pit or something. And of course, enemies alongside the hazards, especially because if you just touch an enemy, it's going to hurt you. But other things, there are a lot of switches that you're going to hit. It might be to unlock a door, to get an elevator, to move. Other times it might be actually to unlock a shortcut from the other side. And a lot of this might come in timed sequences where you have to get to a certain place in a certain amount of time, or you have like one shot because of the crumbling platforms. You have to do it all in one sequence. And again, there'll be pits and hazards. If you fall into a pit, you'll probably go back to the last quote unquote stable ground. Reminds me a lot of Infernax. And of course, this can get more advanced when you get some of the upgrades and different traversal things with some pretty tough sequences where you have to do a lot of these special skills that you get and even kind of go through these sequences all in the air. So let's talk progression in the game. This is very much going to be a go until you can't. like keep going in certain directions until you hit a wall or can't move forward anymore, or you don't have the mechanic to move forward. In that respect, of course, it's a Metroidvania, but it's more so with this than games like Blasphemous and Death's Gambit, I would say. It's more like you can go in a lot of different directions. The map is very expansive and very branching. I'd say there's like maybe 10 to 12 different quote-unquote areas. At least they're different colored sections on the map. But consistently in the game, especially in the early goings, you could look at like 5 different directions to explore, go there and, find a couple more areas. There's really a large pool of areas, I would say in the first half of the game to 2/3, where you don't need some of these traversal upgrades. And so that's just giving you like a really big pool of areas that you can explore and different threads to pull at. And of course, once you get those upgrades, those Metroidvania traversal mechanics that you can use, it becomes a little bit of lock and key, and it's gated that way. But again, not until pretty far along. Like there is a pretty big pool to explore that you can find your way through without needing a certain upgrade. Of course, once you find those upgrades, then it's all about remembering, where was I or where did I find that like I couldn't go further. And I feel like the map, once again, can be pretty helpful with that visually. Of course, if you have gone to a room and there is an exit or there is unexplored continuation of that area, it'll kind of visually display that on the map. Like you'll see like a cutoff or you'll see a door that you didn't go through. I didn't really find remembering those locations to be too difficult because really I just looked at the map and wherever I, stopped exploring in certain directions, I thought, okay, I have this new mechanic. Maybe I can go there and see if I can get there now. Something else that'll happen in the game is you'll meet a lot of NPCs, and some of them will be recurring. And it's interesting because I found this to be a really vague sign of like, oh, I guess I am progressing in the game because this is like the 3rd time I've talked to this guy and he's acknowledging that. It's not just like blank dialogue or like rhetoric or whatever. It's like, oh, we meet again or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I must be, kind of going in the same direction or whatever. It's interesting because there's like 5 or 6 NPCs that kind of treat you this way. And I find that to be helpful. Maybe some people might find it overwhelming or frustrating because it's like, oh, everybody's saying, hey, we meet again. I guess I should be going in all these directions, which is kind of the case. But I also feel like that alleviates this frustration of like, I don't know the correct way to go or anything like that. It's also helpful because they actually give you some context of vaguely what you're trying to do or an update on maybe who you are or your context in this world. Eventually, you will get to rooms where there are bosses, and so you're going to fight a lot of bosses in the game. I don't know a total number. I'd say at least 10 to 15 in total. These are often going to be gates into new areas. Reminds me a lot of Nine Souls. It's interesting because I feel like there are only 3 main bosses for the story end, and they wind up being on like far ends of the map. And as I was playing through the game, I feel like this was the only real sense that I was progressing to an end of the story, but that didn't take away from what I was doing along the way to eventually get there because I feel like it's gated that way in the long run. Other things that you might need to do to progress. So you may literally need keys to certain doors, and these might be keys that you find in a shop that you'll have to pay with currency, which we'll talk about. And eventually, sometimes you're going to be returning to certain areas, whether it's like a central location in the map, which some of the NPCs might spell out for you, or way at the far ends, of course, when we talk about like getting a certain traversal mechanic and finding that there are certain areas that you haven't explored. But of course, let's talk about how the game is paced in general. And like we said, the game is very open explore. I found that I was just free to wander, to collect things, to find upgrades to my character, go to these dead ends as far as I could. And I found that to be a little relieving and not too stressful, especially because the game doesn't tell you a lot. So it's not like you're searching for this one thing that you heard about. It's just like you're just going, and it feels kind of natural to just explore. And in that respect, we talked about there being sort of 3 main bosses. I don't feel like for most of this game there really is a critical path. It really only starts to appear once you start to find some of these main bosses. And again, there's only 3. So it's only like near the end of the game where you realize like, okay, now it's sort of shaping up what I need to do. The rest that I've done along the way was really just to get to these locations or get to this place in the story where I finally realize, okay, here's the way to the end. And of course, eventually that's brought to fruition with getting these certain upgrades. So you're going to get traversal upgrades. You're going to start out just normal, but then you'll get a wall jump, then you'll get a double jump, then you'll eventually get like a zip line mechanic. Sometimes you'll get hazard immunity. Again, all of these things are kind of gating where you can go, but not until you get a lot of the map explored. It kind of feels like you're eating a pie from the inside out. This is this weird analogy that I just kind of thought of as I was playing. Like, you're free to kind of traverse all along the inside of the pie, and eventually it's going to reach you towards the outer edge, which is like, okay, now I'm starting to realize, what I need to do. And so you finding these different things or upgrades or finding these NPCs or even something as simple as fast travel, it's really up to you how you pace that, and the chance that you'll find them all sort of in quick succession. It's probably not likely, but it's not so much like an open world. It's like you're just slowly going as far as you can. It's just sometimes you can choose, between 5 directions. And the same thing goes for finding these NPCs. Like I said, sometimes they will be giving you story context. Other times they will be opening up certain abilities or opening up certain shops for you to buy things. There is one NPC in particular, which is kind of the key to the fast travel. It's something that you might take longer than other people to find or to have it come to fruition. Also linked to NPCs is map markers. This I found a little odd because the different types of map markers that you will find, whether it's like save points or currency bank or the fast travel points, you actually have to find a certain NPC for each one. And I think you have to kind of progress their quote unquote story, which is just like see them in a couple locations for them to finally be like, hey, I can help you out here by putting these on your map. I found it odd, but it wasn't that terrible. There was a point mid-game where I was like, okay, I want to know where all these fast travel locations are, or like I can't remember where the nearest save point was. And so I found early in the game like that, I wish that map markers would just appear or that I could actually physically mark it on the map. But eventually I did appreciate it kind of helping you get acquainted or realize that you need to talk to NPCs. The order that you find the upgrades seems to be pretty set. The first one that you will find is probably the healing mechanic, which is really interesting. It's kind of taking currency that you have, and you have to hold a certain button, and you have to hold it for a certain amount of time, and then it'll give you back a health point. It can be kind of interesting to deal with the timing in like an actual combat setting or a boss battle, but that is going to be the first thing that you find. And then you will find the wall jump, like I said, and then the double jump, and then the zip line, which is like a progressive way of being able to traverse certain things. And all of these things eventually will be needed, but other things like we talked about, like the fast travel, it is kind of optional when you eventually find the ability to use the mechanic. And in that aspect, it can make for a unique experience, like me playing it versus you playing it. Let's talk about combat. This is something that you're going to come across constantly. Almost in every room, there's going to be enemies. There's an interesting observation about the respawn of enemies. I think it varies depending on the enemy. So like I'll go into a room and fight a bunch of enemies and then leave the room and then come back, and like maybe 1 or 2 of them has respawned right away. So I don't know if that's enemy dependent. I don't know if that's the specific room and each enemy in that room has a unique respawn timing or something like that. But I will say enemies have really great variation. It can be from their size to their movement, whether it's their movement speed or whether they're flying or walking or on wheels. The aggro distance for each one of them is going to be different. And again, like we talked about, every enemy, if you run into them, if you touch them, you're going to get harmed, but a lot of them will shoot projectiles at you, and they're going to be varying speeds of projectiles, varying arcs and ranges and whatnot. They all will have sort of different approaches. Not all of them are going to bum rush you. Some of them are kind of going to be indifferent and almost act as hazards in a room where you just have to avoid them or you can kill them. Obviously, they're going to have varied amount of health. Going to take a varied number of hits to kill them. Their reaction time to you is going to be different. Like sometimes enemies won't release projectiles until you hit them. Some of them will explode when you've killed them, so you have to kind of be aware of them, and the range of that explosion can vary. And so, of course, this is going to vary the encounters because you're going to get different combos of enemies. It's also going to be different depending on the room. You're going to have different room sizes. Some of them are going to be skinny hallways. Some of them are going to be big rooms that have sort of multiple layers that you can really get up high. The presence of hazards is really going to throw a wrench in this, as well as the platforming. So you've got a lot of different things going on. It makes for an experience with combat where it's constantly fresh and unique. The different encounters, I find them really engaging and innovative, especially with different rooms that have different hazards that you have to dodge at the same time. It's interesting though, because I would not necessarily compare this to a game like Mega Man, where it's like each enemy placement is so perfectly put and it is a little bit of a chess game with what you have to do or your timing. It's not quite like that, because I find that when you're backtracking and going to old areas and just trying to cut through rooms, it's actually really possible to get through these rooms quickly. A lot of them are pretty vertical, like you can, fall down really fast and not really hit an enemy and not be worried about that. The boss fights in this game are really fun, I would say. Some of them are tough. Some of them I died maybe 5 or 6 times, but the arenas are going to vary, and then all the other things that we talked about are going to be at play. All of them are going to have multiple phases, and in those multiple phases, they're going to have different mechanics, potentially. They're pretty fast-paced, definitely faster-paced than a lot of the rooms, but you're going to have to deal with a lot of things. You're going to have to deal with the boss, maybe whatever projectiles they're shooting out, and whatever hazards might be in the room, or might be getting released from the boss. So all those things make for some really fun fights and some unique encounters. And then let's talk about your character. So obviously you're going to be in battles, you're going to be taking damage. You will have like hearts. They're these circular health tanks up at the top. You can get more, but it's going to require you finding 3 pieces. And then you have an NPC that you're actually going to need to take them to. Your weapon swipe, this is pretty basic, and this is going to kind of be the weakest point, I feel, overall of combat. There's going to be no change in it. It's always going to do the same swipe, but you will have to deal with a lot of like jump and swipe timing, especially with that. And then if you find a moment, you might need to do the heal mechanic that, might take some time. Healing during a boss fight can actually be pretty tough. Your character is going to be able to equip different chips, and you're going to have different slots to input them, and they're going to be color-coded. Like you'll have a red slot, so all the red chips can go in there, a green slot, and a blue slot. But these chips are going to be out in the world. You're going to find them, or you can buy them at certain shops. And these are going to be, maybe buffs to your health, like maybe add another health tank, increasing your invincibility frames after you get hit. It can activate certain passive damage attacks that'll happen around you in the environment that are actually pretty cool. It could be simple things like attracting currency when you're around, and you're also able to buy or find extra slots. So you start with 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green slot, and you can upgrade and get extra slots for all 3 colors. And like we said, you can buy a lot of these things. So there are going to be shops, and these are going to be certain NPCs. They might be selling chips. They might be selling other items like certain keys, like we said, that'll open doors. Or they'll be selling the empty slots that you can use to expand how many chips you can equip. And of course, you're paying for all this with currency. And so the currency in this game, pretty much right out of Ratchet and Clank, you're going to be collecting nuts and bolts, and that's going to be your currency. And you get this by killing enemies or potentially finding stashes in the environment. Like you'll see these weird, it almost looks like something you would find in the pyramids or in a mummy's tomb or something, where they're trying to take their riches with them. It's like these strings that might be hanging that have the gold nuts and bolts on a string, or it might be these like weird little monuments sitting there that are just covered in these gold bolts. So you just hit them and they'll release the currency to you. But what's interesting is you're also using this currency for this heal mechanic. And again, the heal mechanic, something you'll get early on. You have to hold a certain button a certain amount of time. There will be a visual cue and an audio cue for it. But this can be something that's very helpful as you're exploring. It can be tough to use in a boss battle because you really have to time it so that you're not going to get hit, because it's kind of leaving you as a sitting duck. And then just other things in the game. There is a ton of collecting. I think this is linked to the achievements, at least the Steam achievements, I think. Really irked that this isn't on PlayStation. I would really love to see this trophy list, possibly get a platinum trophy for it, but you're not really getting any notifications on Switch that you're finding all the things. You're just kind of looking in your inventory and hoping that you did it all. But you can find all the chips in this game. I think there's like 25 or 30. All the heart pieces, I think I found them. I have a max of 8 hearts. You're also going to find a lot of lore nodes that you'll go out and interact with that'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. Like I said, the NPCs, I think when you talk to them a certain amount of times in their locations, that'll be like finishing their quest. So you're getting something out of a lot of NPCs. It might be, like I said, map markers or something like that. There is one big collection quest. This one NPC is looking for power cells, and I don't know how many in total, maybe like 15 or 20. Finding these, this is where you're finding some really tough platforming challenges, like at the end of certain rooms. I really wanted to find all these. I don't think I did, but every time you find a couple, you go back to where this NPC is, and you get a lot of rewards. It could be just currency, it could be heart pieces or whatever, but that's something that was driving me for a while. And then finally, in terms of accessibility, there are save points in this game. I'd say they're fairly frequent. These are going to be helpful. Anytime you pass through them, you just hit the interact button and it'll save. You'll get full health. Reminds me a lot of the ones from Time Spinner. But if you die at any point, if you lose all your health, this is where you'll respawn. And of course, if you do die, though, you will lose half of your currency, which can be frustrating, but the game also has an interesting mechanic with your currency. You have these currency bank locations. Most of the time, they're near a save point, but not always. This is where, at any point, if you go up to them, you can put in whatever currency you have with you into the bank, and then it won't be on you. So if you die, you won't lose it. This is really awesome because even if you go to a shop, it'll pull up your bank number and you can buy right from there. So this is like just a smart thing that you want to do, especially if you have a lot of currency, like a couple hundred. However, if you put currency in, just remember that if you have no currency, you're actually not going to be able to heal. So you have to constantly have some currency in your immediate pack. And then, of course, the map markers, like I said, maybe irksome to some people. I was a little irked about the first half of the game where I didn't have any map markers, so I couldn't really remember anything. But being able to talk to NPCs and eventually get map markers for the save points, for the different currency banks, for where NPCs are, and the fast travel locations, it can be really useful, especially in the last half of the game, because if you're trying to clear up areas or figure out places that you need to revisit, these can be helpful. But again, I wasn't really a fan of how these were split up into different NPCs. Like, I wish I could just get them all at the same time. But at the same time, it was something that was pretty unique and interesting to me that I had never seen before. All right, let's talk about the vibe of Haiku the robot. And let's start with the visuals. So this is fairly pixelated, but they're kind of blurred together, so it's not like blocky or like Infernax or anything like that. It does feel kind of smooth, like within bodies or characters or background environment or something like that. And there is a lot of strong differentiation and detail. I would say better than most Metroidvanias. Certainly better than a game like Blasphemous or Death's Gambit. You know, Death's Gambit looked a bit grainy. This is definitely smoother. Maybe it's because the sprites and the environments are a lot simpler, but the backgrounds, I would say, like not the foreground, not the platforms or anything like that, but the backgrounds, like really vast. You really feel a vastness. Even if you're in like the factory, like you're really seeing the machinery in the background. It really just visually provides a lot of depth. even when you're in like the forest area, like you're seeing far away landscape, like sometimes like, a dusty, hill or mountain or savanna or something where you're kind of outside. Like you really are getting that visual communication. And in the foreground, I'd say it's generally pretty busy with detail and with action, which is really good. It's really visually getting your eyes fixated. The hazards, like the different electro pads or whatever, like you're seeing the jolts between them, like visually trying to communicate like, hey, you don't want to touch this. But also like in the pits, like at the bottom of the pits, sometimes there's like gears moving really fast, kind of faintly as if they're in the background. And the enemies and the projectiles, like some of these are going to be bright, other these are going to be dark. They kind of go with the environment. I would say most of the projectiles, like the lightning ones, like you're going to see these bright yellow bolts. But other times, like different things depending on the environment. Like when you're going through the forest environment, like you kind of see these plants, these little plants that feel like they're in the background, but as soon as you walk past them, they come to life, and all of a sudden this is an enemy. Just that unique visual mechanic to that area, as opposed to like when you're in the factory or something, and like there's a giant flat steamroller, like as soon as you get on their platform, like they're going to come right at you. So just a lot of uniqueness to the different environments, the different areas, and I found that to be pretty refreshing. Colors, I find this game very colorful and beautiful, but not over the top. First of all, I think there's a pretty strong contrast between the background and the platforms, as well as like the hazards and the enemies. Like the platforms are probably like a, dull color or like pretty dark. But like I said, the hazards really pop. Like the enemies, depending on the environment, like they really do stand out. The areas definitely have like specific themes. Like you go to the forest, it has a green tinge to it. In the hot area, the red furnace, like it's very red in the background, like a dustiness. But something about the colors, like I said, they're not flashy, they're not blinding. It's almost like they're a dull pastel, but yet still like rich yellow or rich red. It's just like not in your face. It has a dustiness to it. And I really found that refreshing because sometimes like it's over the top colors. Like even I think of something like Chants of Sennaar, like the yellow in that game is like really hyper pushed out to you, and it does really well for that game. But I found it really interesting, and even a better way to show detail in this game is to kind of dull the colors despite them being there. The audio in this game, I find the sound effects really helpful, especially like the healing mechanic. Like you hear the twisting of the wrench as you're trying to heal, and you know how many twists it takes, and you also see like the dot in your health thing, sort of appear, so it's going to be finished quickly. The stamina meter, like if you go all the way with the stamina meter and you try to keep dodging, like you'll hear like a clicking, like, oh, you're not able to do it. As well as things like if you're in certain environments where you're being impeded, like there are certain environments where your body can't take it, it's too hot, and so you'll hear like and see your character on fire, but you hear like a hissing and your health is slowly going down, so you have to get out of there. I found the music in this game to be fine. It's sort of like a low volume, mostly minor clangings and cave-like echo sounds. There are definitely like distinct tunes in each area, but it's not the forefront of the game. It's not supposed to be like the thing that sets it apart, I would say, but it's definitely there, and it definitely sets the environment. And in terms of settings and themes, so obviously you're a robot. A lot of the NPCs are robots. You got a wrench to fix yourself. You're using bolts as currency. At times, you're going to be doing different things to your character. You're going to be sealing them with water sealant so that you can go into water environments, things like that. And just the different environments in general. Like you're in a factory, you're in a furnace. It feels like you being a machine, a robot is kind of at home here. There's also the idea that you're kind of in the future, I would say, and you get that sense with a lot of the collectibles with lore bits in them. This idea of wherever you're living, there being like creators and, talking about the past with them or their role. There is a sense that you're in the world post-humanity, and there have kind of been multiple robot generations. It gives a slight vibe of like Nier Automata in that respect. And then there's this idea of NPCs will vaguely refer to like a prophecy and, you're here to save everything. And there's this idea that like robots in the environment, in the societies that you're around, have slowly, been infected by a virus. There's this corruption and you're there to save it. It's not really affecting you, so you're the chosen one, maybe, something like that. Again, you're reading lore bits that might have this. The NPC dialogue might be giving this away. I would say all this is kind of present and denoted for you to find, but it's kind of light. It's not like hitting you over the head with it. It's not like trying to preach to you or anything like that. It's just a story that's there if you want it, but otherwise, you're just going about your Metroidvania experience. All right, let's wrap up the conversation about Haiku the robot. So this, for me, is a surprisingly high-level Metroidvania experience. I would put this alongside games like Blasphemous, Time Spinner, Nine Souls, Infernax, Gumbrella. The thing that's a little different is I would say that this is a tight, sort of short and sweet experience. I would say the same about Gunbrella, maybe. Not something that's long in the tooth. You're going to find a lot of the typical tropes and gating, but really uniquely open for exploration. It's really spaced out, and it really kind of lets you stretch your legs a little bit. And that's because it just feels very able to play and explore at your pace. I would say for some people, it can leave you struggling a little bit to find certain things, to not have the map markers for a while, to specifically find the fast travel. It's not something in some games where you just have it right away and you know what it means. It's self-explanatory. Like, it does have you kind of looking around and eventually bumping into it. I appreciate the minimal direction. Some people might not, but I feel like this game is kind of built for that and for you to kind of just be okay with that and not really stress about even where you have to go, because eventually it'll get revealed to you. Platforming is great in this game. Really feels amazing. We talked about the jump feel, the different mechanics, what you'll get later on, the upgrades. Pretty unique, I would say, in terms of the encounters and the different combinations. Again, despite the fact that the combat is pretty limited in terms of like you swinging a sword one way. Again, I feel like that's probably the weakest aspect of the game overall. It's just like you're not getting any special moves, but you are able to do different things and work around different enemies and really make this a challenging experience, especially when you're trying to explore and find some of those extra things that take really difficult platforming sequences. In terms of value, I honestly think $20 is a fair value for this game. Anytime it's on sale, I think that's going to be great. I just can't believe I paid $4 for this on Switch. I think that's a freaking steal. And anybody who sees this on sale for $4, if it's still on sale on Switch, just get it. You will not be disappointed, I promise. I would even see paying like 10 or 15 bucks for it. I do think $20 is a good MSRP for the value that you're getting here. Like I said, it's a high quality game. It's very approachable, especially in terms of a Metroidvania. Some people really get turned off by Metroidvanias, especially because the storefronts are really flooded with them, but it never felt too tough or insurmountable at all. Yet still, I feel like there was a lot of challenging aspects. Some platforming sequences, some boss battles were pretty challenging, but I felt rewarded on the other end. If you're not someone who plays Metroidvanias, this might actually be a really great introduction to the genre for you. And so I do highly recommend this game. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode to see what new game we found for you.